It's time to talk sports. It's Hacksaw's Headlines, a panorama of the world of sports, stories, comments, and opinions.
Touchdown, San Diego!
Now, here's iconic sports talk show host Lee Hacksaw Hamilton and co-host John Riley.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Lee Hacksaw Hamilton, along with my co-host broadcasting from left field, John Riley, and we welcome you coming off an unbelievable great sports weekend. Our Monday bonus podcast is brought to you by DIXIELINE Lumber and Home Centers, 9 locations to serve you in San Diego. If you've got projects, they have materials. If you want ideas, they can become your new best friend, DIXIELINE Lumber. We are broadcasting on location from my cottage in the Northern Adirondacks in upstate New York. John Riley is anchoring back in our San Diego studios. John, the only thing I can tell you is it's not winter up here in the Northern Adirondacks heading towards the Canadian border, but I can see winter from here. It's pretty cold, and I was going to do this outside, but even that would test my patience. Too chilly and too much wind, so we're back inside at our cottage. How you doing? What a weekend.
What a weekend. What a game last night. It looks like football weather out there in the Northeast. Well, we got a lot to talk about today, Lee.
Oh, we're going lots of different directions. John, let's just get topics on the table so we can get this thing off and running. Couple of business items before we start. When we are done with the podcast, we open up to you, the fans, up and down the West Coast and across Canada who are joining us. It's called Fans Forum. We invite you to participate. You pick the topic, ask a question, make a statement. We'll try to get as many people on in Fans Forum as we can right at the end. If you like sports, check my website. That's the address right across the top of the screen, LeeHacksawHamilton.com. You won't believe the one man's opinion column that's going to be posted this afternoon. It's amazing, my reaction to what we just saw this weekend in the baseball playoffs. So check the website. Top of page of my homepage, there's an orange box. Fill it out. Become part of Hacksaw's Insiders Group. Also want you to share. Tell everybody what we're doing with the Monday and Thursdays podcast. We also want you to subscribe. Therefore, you will get alerts every time we put things up on the YouTube channel. John, we're going a lot of different directions, but the only topic on the table I think anybody, at least in Southern California, wants to talk about is the Padres, the Dodgers, and what happened in the baseball playoffs on a Sunday night. Go ahead. Just pop it up there. Let's talk about it.
I mean, what a game. I mean, it was entertaining. It was dramatic. It had a lot of huge moments with the fans and the players. I want to hear what you have to say about this, Lee.
The Padres had no fear of the Dodger batting order. I think the Dodgers now have to have fear about who the San Diego Padres have become. That was 6 hours. A nice headline you put up there, tension and electricity. And it didn't end well for the Dodgers. And I think the most stunning thing is all the junk that happened during the course of Sunday Night Baseball, the entire nation got to see. They got to see what the Padres have become as a franchise, as a team. They got to see how the Dodgers reacted and how their fans reacted even more badly. Yu Darvish was just dominant right from the start. The Padres just continued to hammer Dodger pitching. 6 home runs, that's a record. And then the Dodgers started to whine. The Dodgers started to cry. The Dodgers started to yap. There were beanballs. There were home runs. There were unbelievable defensive plays by guys going over the fence to pull home run balls back. And the fans just absolutely lost their mind. The Dodgers look like first-place frauds right now. You know, we can praise the history of Dodger baseball, and we should. All the World Series rings, the fact that they've gone to the Fall Classic on an annual basis, Jackie Robinson back in the day. But at the end of the day, you got battered 10-2. You got beaten really badly at home, and the 54,000 fans in the stands at Chavez Ravine just kind of look like bums. And yeah, you have booed Manny Machado since Manny was back there as a Dodger third baseman, that rental season where he said, I don't have to look like Johnny Hustle. And now you got public enemy number 1, Jurickson Profar in left field. You got public enemy number 2, Fernando Tatis, and you saw Manny act as a leader in the dugout, pulling his team together, saying, this is who we can be. Look at what we've done to those guys. And then on the mound, you had Jack Flaherty, who just fell apart and then acted like a red ass, that's a baseball terminology, when things were going bad, screaming at Machado, screaming at Tatis. You know, the Padres are inside the Dodgers' heads right now. Even though the Dodgers won game one of that playoff series, San Diego jumped them early. Now the Padres just bury them in game two. I know it only counts as one victory. Now they come back to Tuesday at Petco Park. I just think it's going to be unbelievable game three of the playoff series. And the Dodgers are battered emotionally. They are battered physically. Their pitching staff is an absolute wreck. And the Padres come home with a chance to finish this thing off by Wednesday night. So, John, that's my one man's opinion on what we're going to talk about. And I ask you this afternoon, go to my website and see my one man's opinion column that I wrote. Yeah, I had some opinions about Dodger fans and the Dodger players. John, you're standing out there in left field. Go ahead. Tell me what you saw, what you think.
This is why we love sports, because it was so entertaining and there was just so many moments, so many different things that happened. And it's interesting listening to John Smoltz kind of break it down about how playoff games are different than regular season games, and at every pitch matters. And just you got to say this is a real rivalry now, right? I mean, it's legit. The Padres won the season series. The Padres beat them in 2022. The Padres are tied. They won a game on the road, coming home to San Diego. Like you said, they can win it, in the next two games, just like they did in 2022. But I'm just loving this. I've been basking in the glory of this win for the last, what has it been, 18 hours or so. And I just can't wait for the next game to come back down to San Diego. This is so fun.
Of the opinion that the Padres are inside the Dodgers' head and the Dodgers just cannot handle it because all the trauma they have around them with their pitching staff crisis.
Yeah, and then on top of it, we were playing from behind for pretty much the entire game, and then Profar Robin Mookie of that home run, which is so awesome. Just the way he kind of bounced backwards like a pogo stick and kind of sort of trolling the Dodger fans. It was fantastic television, and I'm really happy that the nation got to see this. Dodger-Giants games are always a fierce rivalry too, but this one's kind of different. What do you think, Lee?
I think the dimensions of the franchise in San Diego are very different than they've ever been. And obviously what's befallen this Dodger franchise this year with all the pitching issues, and, that we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, that they've got so many pitchers hurt, the epicenter of the pitching crisis in Major League Baseball. But for the Dodgers just to react the way the Dodgers did, and for Flaherty to do what he did on the mound, and then what he did in a dugout after he got pulled from the game, Dave Roberts how's he going to control the emotions of his team? How's he going to gather this pitching staff back? And now Freddie Freeman has re-injured that ankle, and I don't know if he gets to play in game 3 or game 4. That could end their season. I mean, this to me is just devastating what the Dodgers have become emotionally, as well as what's happened to them physically. And the whole nation got to see who the Friars are right now. And there's a lot of people that don't like big market New York Yankee baseball, nor big market Dodger baseball. Hell, I'll bet you 3/4 of the nation's becoming brown and gold fans right now. Agree or disagree?
Oh, my God. Yeah, I mean, definitely agree. Love the back and forth between Manny and Flaherty when Manny was at third base. I thought Manny handled that like a pro, like a gentleman. Well, maybe not a gentleman, but definitely like a mature ball player. And, wasn't allowing him to get sucked into all the emotion like, maybe he would have had done it about 10 years ago. But how about you, Darvish? I mean, proving that you don't need to throw a million miles an hour to get guys out. This guy is an artist.
So at the end of the day, because you had to proofread my one man's opinion column, was I correct? Was I right? Or was I right when I told Dodger fans, take that, bitch?
Yeah, that's what I was going to remember what you said. It was take that, bitch. It's just so funny. And the rivalry between the fans is real. It's legit. There's no place, obviously, for throwing stuff onto the field, but I love like Tatis, just the fake tears and just kind of giving the business to the people in right field. It's just so fun. So I just can't wait for Game 3.
Is it Tuesday night yet? Okay, we go from that topic. There are other playoff games that we need to address just briefly, but you're a Dodger fan, you're a Padre fan, feel free to dial in right now in the chat box for Fans Forum and express opinions. Is this series about to end, or do you think this sucker goes to 5 games? Was that a one-game aberration, or is this the beginning of the changing of the guard in the National League West? Dodger fans, sucks to be you right now. Padre fans, you want to gloat, you can right now. Jump into the chat box. Fans Forum coming up. Next topic on the table.
Next topic. How about these other games? That Mets-Philly game was unbelievable.
Here's the most astounding aspect to what we have seen. The Mets have been on the road for 13 straight games by virtue of the end of season schedule, by virtue of the rainouts, by virtue of having to go back to Atlanta to play the doubleheader, and then going to Philadelphia. And the series is tied 1-1 now as it goes back to Citi Field. Philadelphia's bullpen imploded in Game 1. The Mets rallied back to win. The Mets bullpen and Edwin Diaz is becoming very, very tenuous as the closer. That implodes in Game 2. So back we go to Citi Field. They'll be crazy there, too. That series has now become a best-of-3 because it's tied 1-1. New York Yankees, Kansas City. We're waiting for Judge and Soto to go off. You know, Kansas City is a team that staggered in the month of September. They had 2 separate 7-game losing streaks, John, and they are still in postseason play, but we're waiting for Judge and Soto to go off. You got Cleveland, Detroit. I told you that the Tigers are going to wake up and suddenly realize where they were and did not have a good first game against the Guardians, my Indians. Cleveland jumped them for 5 in the first. Detroit never recovered. You know, the most astounding thing to me, I mean, the Guardians have had a really good statistical season in terms of wins. The Guardians have a collective team batting average of .238. And I swear to you, can anybody name anybody in the Cleveland lineup aside from Jose Ramirez and the ex-Padre Josh Naylor? You probably can't. This is going to be an interesting series to see if Detroit can emotionally come back in this Monday game as they play Game 2 now, just like Kansas City plays Game 2 against the Yankees. Your perceptions of all things Mets-Phillies and what else is going on across the street in the American League.
Well, I mean, that Mets-Phillies game certainly proved that the Phillies have got the bashers. And boy, Castellanos, man, he had a day. And he seemed like almost like Ohtani, sort of flipping his hair around like he's some prima donna. But you got to give it up. The Phillies did really well. It was interesting bringing in Diaz in that high leverage situation. It didn't work out for the Mets. But I'm just still flabbergasted that the Mets are doing what they're doing. And now they get to go, just like the Padres, they get to go home, split 1-1. This series could be over in the next 2 games. Yankees. Yeah, the Yankees and Royals, you know, I think about the old 1978 through 1980 era when they battled each other, and that was a great run. But Kansas City doesn't have it going now. The other series, Cleveland and Detroit, but didn't Jack Flaherty play for the Tigers and then the Dodgers traded for him? I wonder if the Tigers would like to have Flaherty back.
Well, right now the Tigers have got the ace. He's going in Game 2. Tarik Skubal, who's maybe the hottest pitcher in the American League and hottest pitcher in baseball this side of Chris Sale. So that's going to be a fascinating second game matchup. So we got baseball all this week to talk about, though some of these series could be over by Wednesday night. We go from that. There's baseball notebook stuff off the field we need to address too, John.
Good, bad, exciting news. What do you got, Lee?
Well, let's start with Cincinnati. You know, they hit the eject button on David Bell a week ago. They had a fractured season, decimated by injuries, massive disappointment, but they lost so many everyday players before they got out of spring training. Then their pitching staff broke down as they went through the season, and they didn't make the playoffs and sub 500. So they fired David Bell out of nowhere. They hired Terry Francona. This guy's resume, this guy's credentials, pretty impressive. Started in Philly, went to Boston, had great success when they ended the curse of the Red Sox. Then he went to Cleveland and manufactured success there. He's got 2 World Series rings. He's got 1,950 victories. Terry Francona, new manager, Cincinnati Reds. Second logo you're looking at, the Angels. Arte Moreno broke his embargo on dealing with the media. Inside interview, Orange County Register. Called this a low point in ownership. Says we will fix this roster. We will build around the core. Says I will increase the 176 million payroll, but we can't sustain a 215 million payroll as they had a couple of years ago. Words are cheap. Actions probably speak better. How are they going to do this? He said Anthony Rendon has been a historic disappointment. There's a thread out there that is indicating they might eat the contract and just rid themselves of Anthony Rendon because he's not been much of a team player and he hasn't produced over 4 years. I think his batting average for the kind of money he's making is .231 in 4 years with the Halos. Moreno said he's going to sit down and we'll talk about Mike Trout as to what Trout wants to do to contribute to the team because Trout's already said, I'm not waiving my no-trade clause. I want to end my career here with the Halos. We want to fix that. Third item has to do with Joe Musgrove. I tell you, it was very emotional to watch the press briefing when he sat in the dugout and he almost wept when he talked about how devastating the injury was, how he had to wrap his mind around the fact he's looking at 14 to 18 months of rehab from the torn elbow ligament and the fact that they may have to take the bone spur out, which is a second surgical procedure. He's been a warrior. He's been everything good about what Padre baseball represents. And, of course, he's a hometown hero. But that was so hard. And he said this elbow had flared in midseason. The MRI showed there was something not right. He thought he was living on borrowed time, and then he tore the elbow ligament. We don't know if it's going to be full surgery or brace surgery. If it's brace, he could be back within 8 months. But if it's the full ligament transplant, we're talking gone through 2025, and then we'll see what happens, how quickly he gets back into 26. Meanwhile, Scott Boras, your super agent, has taken another client. It's Hassan Kim, and that means he's probably not coming back to the Padres. Now, the shortstop, who of course has got a torn labrum, is going to have his own surgery. He has an $8 million option this season. Scott Boras is not hiring that guy to take up the option. So he's probably going on the open market, but I'm not sure what his value is going to be, considering this season he was hitting like 209 to 220, etc. Boras, of course, continues to represent marquee names. Blake Snell's going to opt out. Cody Bellinger might opt out. Corbin Burns, Baltimore, is a free agent. Alonso of the Mets is going to be a free agent. Bregman of Houston's going to be a free agent. So everything this winter, the baseball meeting starting in December, is going to cycle through Scott Boras's office. So those are the baseball storylines. John, give me your thoughts about Francona in Cincinnati, what the owner of the Angels had to say, your thoughts on the Musgrove calamity, and obviously Scott Boras.
Yeah, I mean, Terry Francona obviously has a great track record, and, it's surprising he's back, but, good on them for getting him. The Reds are going to be an up-and-coming team. They have a lot of really good talent there, so they could be, the NL Central isn't a really super competitive division, so there's a shot for them. The Musgrove deal, isn't it weird that if you can go in and do a Tommy John surgery while you're in the elbow, why can't you take care of the bone spurs at the same time? Why is this two separate procedures?
Because of two separate locations on the elbow and how long you're going to keep somebody under to do these two separate procedures. Time will tell once they get in there, and I think they have to find out, is it a complete tear? And then if it's brace surgery, which is a lesser procedure, then they might consider doing it. But there will be two things that they will do on the scope. One is the transplant of the ligament. The second one would be bone spur if they're going to go in and shave it in the same procedure. Only time will tell.
Is this Musgrove's going to be his second Tommy John, or has he already had one?
No, this is his first.
Okay, good. I mean, because Walker Buehler certainly doesn't look good after two of those surgeries.
Yeah, this success rate for guys who have a second one. At this point, there's not that many have come back, and those who've come back haven't been the same pitcher the second time around. Now, does not say that Walker Buehler, with another off season of strengthening of that elbow and therapy, he could bounce back next year, but it's an extended struggle that he's had at 1-6 on the season, and they're going to give him the ball in Game 3 of this playoff series against the Padres.
Yeah, right on. I mean, here we go with the Padres in the playoffs, but I want to talk about one more thing about Musgrove. He signed that 5-year deal. So how far into it are we? And then he's going to miss all of next season, assuming he has the full Tommy John surgery. When he comes back in 2026, this Padre roster could be completely different.
Yeah, he said it was kind of sad. That's when he started to get choked up. He said, I might not be with these guys, the same group, by the time I'm healthy to pitch again. I think he's got 3 years left on his current contract, and it's upwards of $20 million per season. And, of course, it's covered by insurance. If he never pitches again, the Padres don't pay the full contract. But, again, he'll go through the therapy, he'll go through the rehab, etc.
Interesting. All right,
What's
here we
your
go.
take on the Angels?
Oh, I don't know. It's such a mess up there. It's, again, if Artie Moreno's been hiding from the media, you got to be out there. You've got to be communicating and be transparent to keep the fans engaged. But again, I don't know what to make of these guys. Clearly they don't have the right strategy. It's not working. You've commented about how the Ducks are really embracing this Orange County vibe. I like that idea. Maybe the Angels can learn from that.
Well, the hockey team has created this aura of this is Orange Country in direct shot at Artie Moreno's Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. Artie's swimming upstream. He's got a lot of issues that he's going to go solve. So if you're a baseball fan, you want to comment on what the Angels owner said, you want to comment on the Reds hire, which I think is mystical, talk about Joe Musgrove, and, of course, you got to comment on Scott Boras, Ha-Seong Kim. Invite you to join us. John, let's get to halftime. This segment is brought to you by DIXIELINE Lumber and Home Centers. 9 locations to serve you. We've all done business at DIXIELINE. John, what do you like the most about our sponsor?
Well, there's so many different things. I mean, DIXIELINE's been in San Diego for over 100 years. They're a lumber yard, and they have a drive-through lumber yard. You take your truck and go in there. They'll load you up. They offer great deals, a lot of discounts on items. If you just go to the website, DIXIELINE.com, and sign up and save, you can get on the mailing list and get all the updates for the products and services they're offering at really attractive discounts. So if you're a homeowner, a contractor, DIXIELINE is your partner in San Diego County and now growing up in Orange County.
Up in Dana Point. You got projects, they got materials. You want ideas? This can be your best friend. These guys, DIXIELINE Lumber. John, we're at halftime. When we're done, we're going to go to Fans Forum. People can jump into the chat box, just explain the concept and how they get involved with us. It's like, listeners, your turn's coming up. John, explain Fans Forum.
Yeah, it's your chance to get involved. You have a question in the world of sports for Lee Hacksaw Hamilton. Dive into the live chat on Facebook, X, or YouTube. Look what we've got here. We've got the practicing guitarist, John, Callan, Mario, Greg, XX Revolution, Ang, Javi, Steve, all piling in. We got Yin in there and more coming. So if you've got a comment on the Padres-Dodgers game last night or in anything in the world of sports, just drop it in the live chat.
If you like sports, when we're done with this podcast, I want you to go check my website. There's the address right up top, LeeHacksawHamilton.com. I write a ton of stuff. And whether you like or agree or disagree with what I talk about or what I write about, you got to sample my one man's opinion column today, because I was right to the point. Yeah, I think I hit a 450-foot home run with my one man's opinion column on the Dodgers and Padres. So go sample that. It's listed right there on the website. And by the way, when you go to the website, Want you to join Hacksaw's Insiders Group. There's a big orange box right on the homepage. Fill that out. You'll get on our email list of all the special things we have to do. Also want you to share. Tell everybody what we do Mondays and Thursdays, and subscribe, because when you subscribe, you get automatic messaging every time. It's called an alert. You get automatic alerts every time we put something up on the YouTube channel. So we're doing a lot of different things on a lot of different social media platforms. John, we've talked all things baseball, diving into NFL football.
NFL football. Here we go. By the way, Yin is on a live chat saying, do you guys read the live chat during the podcast? The answer is yes. I'm going through there and flagging the ones that I think we need to add into the fans forum. So if you've got a comment or question, do that. We typically don't engage in the fans forum during Hacksaw's headlines. But
that's
now
coming up right at the end.
Right
NFL notebook. Go ahead, John. What do you got you want to cover?
Well, we're going to talk about the recap of the games. I mean, there were some really good games this weekend. I mean, Lee, we'll start out with the Bears.
Let's talk about the Bears. The Bears beat Carolina. Caleb Williams is now strung together back-to-back 300-yard performances. He looks a lot different now than he did. And the running back they signed in the offseason, the former Detroit Lion, DeAndre Swift, has put together back-to-back big games. Caleb Williams yesterday against downtrodden Carolina throws for 304 and 2 more touchdowns in that victory. It looks as if Chicago and the kid quarterback has turned the corner. Minnesota. Can you believe where the Vikings are at 5-0? They pick off Aaron Rodgers. They battered the New York Jets yesterday, picked them off 3 times, took 1 back for a pick 6. They also had 6 quarterback sacks. Minnesota at 5-0. And the Jets look like they're going in the wrong direction. And I'll tell you, everybody in New York's in trouble. A lot of people wondering if Aaron Rodgers has any gas left in the tank. A lot of people think that offensive coordinator Nathaniel Hackett, we're visiting the same garbage this year as we did last year. A lot of people think Robert Saleh, the head coach, is in big trouble, and maybe even the general manager. Minnesota just firing on all cylinders. Baltimore Ravens beat Cincinnati. And I'll tell you, this was an electric performance. Lamar Jackson goes off for 403 all-purpose yards against the Bengals. They wasted. Cincinnati did Joe Burrow's 392-yard, 5-touchdown performance. Baltimore outgunned them. The Bengals are 1-4. It looks like their season is over. That's not an indictment of Joe Burrow. That's an indictment of that organization. Washington, can you believe the kid? Jaden Daniels just continues to dazzle, moving the football up and down the field. Washington post another victory. They smoked the Cleveland Browns. Defense had 7 sacks. Deshaun Watson has a 74 quarterback rating. He has taken 26 sacks in 5 games. Their offensive tackles are gone. They don't have a running game. Watson can't carry them by themselves, and there's a lot of people really heated right now about the way the Browns have operated this franchise. But how about Jaden McDaniel? He just continues to be spectacular, moving the ball up and down the field. He's got a quarterback rating now of 115. Houston Texans, they rally back. They beat Buffalo. C.J. Stroud goes off for 331 yards. They win it on a 59-yard game-winning field goal. It was awful to see what happened to quarterback Josh Allen. The fact, he took a hit and he fell backwards and his head hit and it looked like he was unconscious. 5 plays later, he came back on the field and finished the game, but he didn't look right and they couldn't move the football. It throws into question, John, the entire protocol of concussions, observations, and treatment. You looked how bad it was. It looked like he was out on the field. And it took him minutes to get him up and get him upright and get him to walk off the field. And 5 plays later, he came back. I just don't understand that. Texans are for real. Buffalo's in trouble. And with Bears watching to see how Josh Allen feels, not just Monday morning when he woke up today, but Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, if there's going to be lingering problems. So, John, those are some of the hot games. Your response.
Isn't it interesting to see how these quarterbacks, we think they're going to be great coming out of college, or maybe we have lower expectations, but once they get to the NFL, our perception changes. Sam Darnold, we thought was going to be a great quarterback. He failed where he went, and now suddenly he's 5-0, and he's got to be feeling good about himself. Jalen Daniels looked good at LSU, but he's not a real big kid, and you kind of wondered how he'd do in the NFL, and he is lighting it up. And then, Josh Allen just seems like this durable kind of like a SUV or a tank that can keep taking hits. But when he hit his head on the ground, you could see how he his neck didn't offer any resistance. He was knocked out for a moment. It had to be. And then for him to come back was just unbelievable. So it's just it's odd what you can get from these quarterbacks. Sometimes you don't get what you expect.
I'm just really concerned about his well-being. Now, he's not had a history of concussions, and that was not a cheap shot hit. He got hit lower in the legs, and he just kind of fell backward, but that's like a tree. That's a 6'6" quarterback from Wyoming that went down head first, and he cracked, and it looked really, really scary. Okay, those are the first round of games. Second group of games we want to talk about, John.
The Raiders, the Rams.
Raiders season is over. The Rams season is in great jeopardy. The Raiders this afternoon benched Gardner Minshew. Gunslinger can't get the job done. We have talked extensively to Raider Nation fans that this guy throws touchdowns, but he throws interceptions. He fumbles the football, and he takes sacks. They just benched him today after 2 more picks, 2 more sacks, and the fact they're not moving the football up and down the field. So that means they're going towards Aiden O'Connell. The second item has to do with what happened in the game against Denver. Patrick Surtain, 100-yard pick six going the other way. They continue to pick off passes. They continue to sack the Raiders quarterback. It was really a miserable performance by the Silver and Bleak, and now they're giving up on Minshew. In essence, they're in last place and their season is over. The Rams situation, this is just a byproduct of all the injuries around Matthew Stafford. Green Bay beat him. Jordan Love, who's been limping, he's got a minor knee issue. He stood in there. He made 2 touchdown passes. Matthew Stafford has no help at all. Interceptions, sacks, not running the football. There are no playmakers on the offensive side of the football for the Rams right now. Their season is 1-4. Sean McVay has never been 1-4 as a head coach with the Rams, so this is not a good situation. Seattle, I don't know, Jekyll and Hyde, they were 3-0 out of the gate, and they haven't won since then. I mean, they got banged around by the New York Football Giants. Giant defense had 7 sacks, and they took a blocked field goal back 60 yards for a touchdown right at the end. And suddenly Seattle, which has got some injury problems at running back, Seattle don't look like the same team that started 3-0 on the season. And then there's the Cowboys. If Dak Prescott can't do it by himself, they're not going to win games. Now, he went off for 352 and a couple touchdowns in the last-second victory against the Pittsburgh Steelers. That win might have salvaged, maybe saved the Dallas Cowboys season, but it's not good. They've lost 6 defensive linemen, including their top 4 defensive ends. And they still got more than half a season to play, and Prescott's having to carry the thing because he can't run the football. So they're in big trouble. And Pittsburgh fan, wow, are they upset. They booed the Steelers in the first half. They booed them at the end of the game when they let Prescott get down the field and throw a game-winning touchdown pass with 20 seconds to go. Justin Fields came out of the game, had to sit for a while, did not have a good, complete game along the way. Steelers have no playmakers at all. It's a big, big issue. And the fans, as much as Mike Tomlin's been a great coach there for 17 years, this Neanderthal offense of run the football, try to control the clock, and there's no way to go down the field with passing plays. That the roster needs to be upgraded and overhauled. So Pittsburgh fan, not real good. And by the way, damn, winter is coming to Pittsburgh early, so they got a lot of reasons to be upset. John, your reaction to the second list in the games?
Well, first of all, Raiders it's a disaster. Minshew is very untrustable. I want to talk about the Seahawks because Geno Smith, I was listening to some of the pregame guys on the studio shows, and they were saying how he, in his pregame ritual, he is amazing, hitting all of his passes at all of the different distances. Did you hear those comments?
Yeah. And you tell you what, he's grown as a quarterback because he was kind of up and down. He was really in and out. By the way, that's another New York Jet refugee. But he's grown as a quarterback. I mean, he's had 380-yard passing games. But at this point, he doesn't have an awful lot of help around him. He took 7 sacks yesterday. So it's not so much Geno Smith's fault as what he does not have around him. But he's grown as a quarterback. He doesn't turn the ball over, but their problem is their roster around him has just not been very consistent. And, they got zinged by what I thought was a substandard New York Giant team. So I was kind of shocked, but he's become a student of the game, and he's big. He's athletic. He's about 6'4". He did a lot of things at West Virginia. It took him a long time to learn to become an NFL quarterback. I think he's getting there, but if you don't have support around you, you can't get the job done. But he's the future because there's no quarterback waiting in the wings.
Yeah. I don't know if he's the future. He's kind of middle-aged for a quarterback, right?
Exactly.
The other game that you didn't have on your list was Tampa against Atlanta. And how about Kirk Cousins in that Thursday night game?
Kirk Cousins. Well, we talked a little bit about it on Friday. I mean, Kirk Cousins obviously throwing for 509 and 5 touchdowns, and he's got people around him for the first time. Now, they have to prove they can do it over a 17-week season, and as long as they keep their skill guys healthy, I think they got a lot. But he took a lot of hits. He's taken a lot of pressures and hits so far the first group of weeks with the season. But he's a gamer. He's hanging in there. We'll just see if they can keep him upright going forward.
All right.
So those are the games. You got an opinion about some of the topics that we've discussed, be it the mess with the Raiders, the injury problems that have befallen the Rams. Pick a team, pick a topic, and join us in Fans Forum. One other set of notes we want to talk about, John, about NFL Notebook.
Pick a team, pick a topic. How about the Raiders and Chiefs?
Save the season trades have to be made. I think by Wednesday, the Raiders will get Davante Adams off the roster. This has become a massive distraction, and it's not helped that Antonio Pierce, the head coach of the Raiders, keeps running his mouth about things. The Raiders are shopping this guy. He's got $18 million per year left over the next 3 seasons on this contract. Teams are not willing to take on that contract unless the Raiders pay a portion of the money. Raiders are asking number 2 draft pick and a player to make the deal happen. We keep thinking Davante Adams rejoining Aaron Rodgers with the New York Jets. The big issue there is, what are the Jets going to give up? The rumor mill is that it may be that the Raiders take the number 2 pick from the Jets and Mike Williams, who's on a 1-year, $10 million contract. Why Mike Williams? Mike Williams played for the Chargers when Tom Telesco was the general manager. Tom Telesco is the general manager of the Silver and Black right now. But there are other teams. Pittsburgh, they have cap space. Might they be willing? They don't have a history of trading high draft picks. Would they be willing to give up a number 2 for a 32-year-old Davante Adams? But Davante Adams would make a big difference in Pittsburgh. He'd give them something they don't have: deep threat speed and veteran experience, and a little bit of firebrand leadership. New Orleans is also in the mix. There has been talk Buffalo might be in the mix. So Davante Adams, I think they have to move this distraction off the roster because he's gone public and said, I want out. Davante Adams might wind up going by Wednesday. Meanwhile, Kansas City, they're operating on the wide receiver Rashee Rice right now. We're going to know by Wednesday how deep this injury is to the knee. There's one sentiment that it's not as severe as first thought, that maybe he's out 8 weeks, comes back at the end of the season. But losing Rice on top of losing Hollywood Brown has really set back that offense. They're going to have to make a trade. And the rumor I keep hearing is that they're talking to Tennessee about DeAndre Hopkins, who's in the final year of a contract. That's a vested veteran. Come in, he'd probably play pretty well. And Brett Veach and Andy Reid, historically in Kansas City, John, have made deals to rent veterans, and the guys they brought in have been difference makers. So your thoughts on this Raiders situation, your thoughts on what Kansas City does?
Yeah, it's interesting you bring these up, because when you're talking about Aaron Rodgers at the Jets, and yeah, that makes sense for a landing spot for Davante Adams. But doesn't the Aaron Rodgers situation there sort of parallel what Montana did with the Niners then going to the Chiefs at the very end of his career? I mean, how often can we expect some of these older quarterbacks to have success? I mean, at some point they just kind of get, they reach their end, don't they?
Well, they do. Normally, you hit the wall, and a lot of times it's got to do with injuries more than it does with anything else. But this is wide receiver because then you got Patrick Mahomes and the tight ends and the number one draft pick Xavier Worthy. So they're looking for a trustworthy route runner more than a game breaker. Kansas City's not going to make a deal within the division with the Raiders, or maybe I should say the Raiders are not going to do anything to make Kansas City another deeper team. So that potential deal for Devontae Adams does not work in Kansas City. But I think Kansas City, Tennessee, DeAndre Hopkins as a short-term rental, and if he has a good second half of the season, and I trust he would, then Kansas City could offer him a 1-year or 2-year extension beyond that. So I think that deal is probably going to happen. John, we go from NFL football. Let's talk about what happened Saturday in college football.
Yeah, huge upsets, including Vanderbilt beating Alabama. Holy moly.
Nice upset. Nice headline, Upset City. Please tell me, did you have this on your bingo card? Because we're going to talk about the AP poll that just came out. Did you have this on your bingo card? Alabama loses to Vanderbilt. You're kidding me. Vanderbilt, which was 0-60 against top 5 teams in the history of the Commodores program, Vanderbilt beat Alabama. Now, Alabama, of course, had beaten Georgia a week ago. They just emotionally could not crank it back up. And suddenly Vanderbilt outplayed them, which was stunning to me. But that's the way this situation evolved. Alabama loses to Vandy. Tennessee got ambushed, went to Arkansas. They lost in Fayetteville. Quarterback play for the Volunteers kind of skitterish, so they fall out of the top 4. Michigan, a week after coming off a big emotional victory, Michigan gets whacked by Washington. Tell you, the Huskies quarterback, Will Rogers, he's a transfer from Mississippi State. He's played pretty well, pretty consistently. He's not throwing for 400 yards there, but Washington's got a good quarterback. Will Rogers threw for 271, and they kind of outgunned Michigan. Meanwhile, among some others, Miami, they were down 35-10 in Berkeley to the Cal Golden Bears, and they roared back. Cam Ward throws for 435 yards and a pile of touchdowns. He's made himself a Heisman Trophy candidate. Miami is still unbeaten. They were down 35-10. They came back and won 39-35. That was pretty impressive. Aztecs. Supposedly, the coach says, we're going to run the football up and down the field. We're going to move the football, and then we're going to outscore everybody. Maybe he lied. The defense has really been impressive for the Aztecs. They wore down Hawaii's quarterback, Braden Schrager. By the time they get done, they had 5 sacks. They had 8 tackles for losses. They had 2 interceptions. They had a 4th down stand. Aztec defense got them to win against Hawaii, so the Aztecs feeling better about themselves as they start to move into the teeth of the Mountain West Conference. And I asked you about your bingo card. You're not going to lie to me. You didn't have this on your bingo card. Did you ever think week 5 of the season, you and I'd be talking about Brigham Young and Iowa State being inside the top 10 of the AP football poll? What a week. What a first half of the season we've had with all these shocking upsets, John.
Do you think that if Alabama still had Nick Saban as the head coach, they would have won in Vanderbilt? Do you think maybe DeBoer is kind of letting them down a bit?
Well, I think there's some sentiment there, but understand how emotionally cranked they were to take apart Georgia. And they just may have gone into Vanderbilt, because everybody's gone into Vanderbilt and just swept the floor with those guys from Nashville. But this one, it looked like Georgia might have been exhausted mentally and physically. And then suddenly Vanderbilt got this big lead, and just Vanderbilt was playing out of its mind. And that's never, ever happened. And Vanderbilt football's been down forever and ever and ever. So it was a shocker. I don't know how much of it was DeBoer or just how much of it was they spent so much currency emotionally and physically to go beat Georgia. It all kind of caught up to them. Bama might not lose another game the rest of the season, but they got one loss. But then there's a ton of people in college football that were in the preseason top 10, got one loss already this season too.
You got to love how the Vandy students lifted the goalpost out and brought it out, into Nashville, and they were partying with it and everything else. I mean, it was such a great deal for them. So good on them. But, Vanderbilt is like that one team in the SEC that doesn't fit, right? I mean, they've never been competitive in that conference.
No, not at all. I mean, it's an academic institution. Hell, they ought to be in the Ivy League rather than the SEC, but you can't get them out of the conference because they have this contract and they're making equal amount of money that Alabama and the other SEC powers are making. But to quote you, good on them. Okay, we should go from college football. You got an opinion about what you're seeing? I failed to mention USC getting beat on the road in the Big Ten, and UCLA has now lost 4 in a row. They're 1-4, and they're not competitive offensively. And now they've lost their starting quarterback, Ethan Garbers. He is out. So things are just unraveling. It's just not going very well. We go from college football. We got hoops to talk about before we go to Fans Forum.
Lakers and the Clippers. What are you hearing in camp here, Lee?
0-2 out of the gate. Looking for answers. Another good headline there. Let's just talk about the Lakers situation. So much attention is being focused on the 12th guy on the team. Please tell me Laker fan isn't hoping that Bronny James is ready to be a star, because he's really not. Lakers got beat by Minnesota in their first game in preseason. Bronny was 1 for 6 shooting the ball. He had 3 block shots, though, in 16 minutes. He really played well. But then he came back on Sunday when they got battered by the Phoenix Suns. In 13 minutes, Bronny James in a second game had 4 turnovers and 3 personal fouls. I've talked about what I think is a real important storyline in the Laker camp, and that's the kid out of Tennessee, the 3-point shooter, Dalton Connect. You know, he was 7 for 13 shooting in that first game against Minnesota. He had 16 points. Gabe Vincent came off the bench. He had 11 points in 15 minutes. He, of course, is coming off knee surgery. Those are players 1 and players 1B that I think are critical to get answers in preseason, because they really need those guys to contribute. However, Connect came back in the second game and was 2 for 9, didn't shoot the ball very well. And Max Christie, the number 1 pick that they've talked about, that this is a guy who's going to take the step forward, he was 3 for 15 last night against the Phoenix Suns. So a lot of big issues as it relates to the Lakers. Clippers got beat by Golden State, which played all of its guys off the bench. The Clippers don't have Kawhi Leonard. James Harden went for 13 points and 8 rebounds as an old man at age 36. I just don't know where the Clippers' firepower is going to come from. Big storyline off the court is Kawhi Leonard has confirmed he's begun a different type of weight training program for him to try to strengthen this knee injury and the inflammation that keeps coming back. He's not going to play in the preseason. I think they're going to monitor his minutes. I doubt he's going to play any back-to-back games for the Clippers. So I just don't know that Kawhi is ever going to be the same player again. And now if you got a half of Kawhi and you don't have Paul George, what kind of season are they going to have going into the new building? Leads me to believe it's going to be a non-playoff season. John, your thoughts on hoops?
Yeah, it's hard to figure out both of these teams. You know, you're kind of wondering, a lot of question marks, looking for answers, as you said. You talked about Max Christie and as one of the players on the Lakers, but wasn't there another Christie like maybe 10 or 20 years ago that the Lakers had?
Yeah, Doug Christie, outstanding 3-point shooter. Don't believe he's related, but he was a fine NBA player, was a fine player out here on the West Coast in college basketball.
He was Pepperdine, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
Yeah, so it's a familiar last name. At least that's what I was thinking about. But when does the season start? It's going to be like, around the 20th of October or so?
I think we got at least 2 more weeks of NBA preseason basketball. So these are questions that we're going to have to get answers to. Not so much Bronny James, but as a 3-point shooter out of Tennessee, Dalton Connect the real deal. That's going to be huge. And then does Max Christie, a former number 1 pick, can he become an instant point guy off the bench? Well, 3 for 15 on Sunday doesn't make you believe he's ready to play. And the veterans they signed last year who are all hurt. Gabe Vincent and Cam Reddish had done some pretty good things other places in Miami and with the New York Knicks. They got to get those guys healthy, get those guys on the court, to get those guys to produce, because it just cannot be an aging Anthony Davis and an aging LeBron James to carry this thing by themselves. I think potentially you look at the roster and say, if players 3 through 7 or 8 do well, it's going to be a good season, because we know AD and the King are going to do well. But if these guys are still skitterish and are still hot and cold, the Lakers, you're going to be rooting for the Lakers trying to get into the play-in game more than be a Lakers team is going to be a difference maker in the NBA West. John, it's time for Fans Forum. Let me remind everybody, this podcast is brought to you by DIXIELINE Lumber and Home Centers. You got projects, they've got materials. You want ideas? Think about all things DIXIELINE Lumber can provide to you. 9 locations in San Diego and the new one that has just opened up in Dana Point. Fans Forum belongs to you, the followers, on our live stream. We are broadcasting today. I am at my cottage in upstate New York where it's really cold. John, I can look out the window here. It's not winter yet, but I can see winter from here, and you are anchoring back in the sunshine in San Diego. You ready for Fans Forum? You got a few of your friends ready to fire us some questions and make some statements. We're going to go from now to Wednesday to get people to talk about the Padres, the Dodgers, the NBA, the NFL. Go ahead.
Yeah, the Padres-Dodgers stuff is just unbelievable. So let's go here to the practicing guitarist. Lee John, Darvish's masterful performance included a great approach when facing Ohtani. How did Cease fail with his electric stuff? This is a big key to the rest of the series, keeping Ohtani in check.
Well, Ohtani hits everybody. Let's understand that. Cease looked terribly out of sync in that game 1. And that was bothersome to me because he was overthrowing his mechanics, his follow-through, falling off the mound. That's why he had no location. That's why he threw 82 pitches and he really scuffled. They'll solve that. They get back in the video room, and I'm sure Ruben Niebla will point out to him, this is what was not right in game 1. And I have no doubt that I think Cease in his next playoff appearance will bounce back, but he was out of sync. But Darvish is so crafty, and Darvish had location, and Darvish was just really dominant, and he was throwing a wide variety of stuff that had the Dodgers, I thought, way off tempo in the course of the game. And in terms of Ohtani, hey, dude hit home runs against everybody, so don't be upset that Cease could not get him out, because a lot of guys could not get him out, but now they come back to Petco Park. And the Dodgers are going to have to compete against the bulk of the Padre pitching staff. They have to compete against a Padre lineup that is no longer afraid of Dodger pitching. And by the way, the intangible, they're going to have to compete in the bedlam that is going to be Padreville. And do you think these fans are going to show up with attitude on Tuesday and Wednesday night to kind of clinch this thing?
Going to be great, man. Petco is going to be rocking. And San Diego is all behind the Padres. I mean, it's fantastic times. Cease is interesting. When his fastball is working, then everything works. And they were even talking about that with Darvish. I mean, Smoltz, we've talked about him in the past, how as a commentator, as a color commentator, he's really good and gives you a lot of technical insight into what their approach is. And you could see that he had this love affair with Darvish and all of the different pitches he had and how he used them and how he set batters up for their second and third time through the order.
Yeah, I thought he was fascinating. And the Cease thing, to me, it looks so mechanically driven that there were flaws in his delivery and how he was coming off the mound, his follow-through, and that's why he just did not control the ball. And yeah, he did crank pitches. I mean, he was up at 97, 98 a little bit early in the game, but his location was a miss. Trust me, Ruben Niebla will solve that situation with Cease. Now we'll just have to see what Michael King does next.
We'll have to see. I'm looking forward to that. We have a day off today, but tomorrow as it starts again. Okay, let's go here to John. He goes, going to be a hot time in San Diego tomorrow. Get the Border Patrol in the southbound lanes of I-5 and I-15. Oh, you're from L.A.? Oh, hell no. Turn around now, please. LFG San Diego.
How about the Padres making the executive decision? You can buy what few playoff tickets we have, but if your credit card shows the zip code in Orange County or Los Angeles or Palm Springs, sorry, not for sale. Only selling to San Diego fans, only selling to Baja California fans, only selling to Padre fans going east towards Yuma. Just fascinating what they've done. But at the end of the day, I don't think very many tickets available at all, unless Padre fans are auctioning off on the secondary market their tickets. But so I don't know how many Dodger fans are going to be there. And this is a once-in-a-lifetime experience, John. If these guys eliminate the Dodgers, then they get to go play probably Philadelphia. These guys won't be that far away from a World Series, so I can't see Padre fans auctioning off tickets right now.
Well, I'm sure Dodger fan would pay a pretty penny for that. I mean, Dodger fans, it's interesting. I saw a lot of video clips of different things from Dodger fans. Like in one case, you saw that one where Profar handed the ball to the fan in left field, as a kind gesture. Yeah. And then the guy threw it, and then someone else threw a ball, and it caused the problem. And then there were people had a lot of video footage in and around Dodger Stadium and in the parking lot of all these fights, these brawls. And a lot of times it was Dodger fan fighting Dodger fan.
Don't drink. Just don't drink. Plain and simple. And also, I saw a video of what was going on down in the Padre bullpen. And fans leaning over, throwing balls and garbage into the Padre bullpen. And they had to restrain Jeremiah Estrada, who wanted to confront a fan who was looking down at him. He even jumped down there. So, I mean, security at the end of the day got there quickly and stopped it. But I guess the ideology, Dodger blue, the Dodger way, takes on a different dimension now because of what we saw on Sunday night.
It's weird because, as a kid, the Dodgers were always, the white, sparkling white uniform with the blue and the little splash of red with the number. The Dodgers were almost like the hero in a lot of cases. They were the good guys. It was Steve Garvey and Ron Say and all these guys that we generally thought were good guys. And the LA fans was a lot of the Hollywood, and that SoCal beach vibe. But things have changed. The Dodger fans seem to be a little more aggressive. They're more like a Philadelphia fan. What do you think?
Fueled by alcohol, baby. Don't drink before you go to the game. That's all I got to say. And the second thing I got to say, when we're done with this podcast, go to my website. Read the column, One Man's Opinion column on my website, Lee Hacksaw Hamilton. Tell me whether you agree or disagree with what I wrote about Dodger fan and what just happened. On we go. Next question, John.
Okay, let's move on. Callan, afternoon, gents. Lee, should we be optimistic about Gary Bettman's remarks about a potential new CBA in a couple of years? What would you say are the most pressing issues the NHL needs to tackle?
Well, I think right now they've solved the Arizona Coyote crisis. I think they should be worried about small market Canada. I don't like anything I've seen that's happened in Calgary. If you go back and make a checklist of the players the ownership of the Calgary Flames has gotten rid of, that looks like a non-playoff franchise for years to come right now. I'd be worried about that. And I'm just worried about the economy and the dollar situation in Winnipeg, although they've signed some of their players now to contract extensions, Connor Hellebuck, et cetera. I'm just worried because last year their attendance numbers were way down. You can't sustain operating an NHL franchise at NHL salaries and prices when you're drawing 13,000 fans per game. And the other thing, they're releasing the NHL rosters right now. I just saw the Montreal Canadiens roster, and of course they've lost their star right winger whom they acquired in Patrick Laine after the terrible hit that he suffered a badly sprained knee. I look at the Canadiens roster and say, who the hell are these guys? This is one of the youngest teams in the league, and of course the Anaheim Ducks are in the process of rebuild. Bettman, their revenue streams have increased. They are taking their salary cap, I think, to $92.5 million next season, which is a massive jump from $75 million where it was just a couple of years ago. So I would say economically, in a lot of markets, things are looking up for the National Hockey League. But I'm kind of indirectly worried about some of the smaller markets because I still think the dollar issue is a big issue there because these salaries are not coming down. Everybody in the NHL is getting $8 to $10 million, all the stars. And how can mid-market with lower budgets be able to handle that?
Well, the revenue is really flowing into the NHL. Do they have a revenue share program like the NFL?
Yeah, they have revenue share and a floor to spending. But by the same token, Calgary, Winnipeg, and some of these people can't afford to have a pile of $8 and $10 million players. The LA Kings might, the Boston Bruins might, the New York Rangers might, but some of the others can't. Hockey Hotline, stay with us through the course of the year. We'll continue to talk puck. John, next question.
Okay, let's go here. Talk of Mario. And he says, Flaherty was doing that to get a spark out of his team, LOL, and it didn't work. The $1 billion may not work also. Baseball is a very funny game, not guaranteed.
Oh, just piling on the Dodgers. Just feel free to take a shot. I'm sorry. Flaherty, his actions on the mound, plunking Tatis, yapping with Machado, then gets pulled from the game and reinserts all this commentary, dropping MFs all over the place right there on TV. I mean, he wasn't asking Manny if Manny wanted to help him move the chaise lounge in the living room. Why do that? Now you've created this furor with the fans. Now you've created this terrible image for yourself as a whiner and crier when you got the crap kicked out of you in the most important game you're pitching this season for the Dodgers. Why do that? Just accept the fact you got beat and get ready to go out there in the next round of the playoffs if you're still alive. So I just think he created an aura that has now put the Dodgers behind the eight ball emotionally. And everybody in the whole bloody nation saw it on Sunday night. Think about that. So not a good look for Jack Flaherty. And he was a really great acquisition up until last night. But, boy, he's kind of muddied the waters for the Dodgers right now. And Dave Roberts, he's got a lot of problems on his hands. Now he's got this emotional trauma problem, too.
You know, this just speaks so highly, in my opinion, of Manny Machado and his leadership and maturity, the way that he rallied the team in that meeting in the dugout, because he was trying to prevent all of the hysteria from affecting the Padres, but clearly all of the hysteria affected Flaherty. You know, he was reacting. He was behind, like you say, behind the eight ball. The Dodgers were losing. But that pitch to Tatis where he got plunked, I mean, I don't think that was on purpose. What did you think? Well,
Flaherty said after the game, I was trying to take command of the inside corner when I plunked him. That's baseball. But Manny was of the opinion you're throwing at him. You know, Manny's response was in the post-game locker room meeting is, we're not throwing at Ohtani. Just because Ohtani hits home runs, we're not throwing at Ohtani. Why are you throwing at my guy? So that's where it is. But it was cool to see Machado put his guys in a group meeting in the dugout during the game. And I have no doubt in my mind what he was saying was focus. Of course, he had the luxury of knowing we're kicking them and we're going home to Petco Park and we can end this sucker by Wednesday night. So, yeah, you want retribution. You don't want your pitchers throwing at a Dodger and reigniting the Dodger lineup. Dodgers are feeling bad enough about where they are right now. But every game is different. Like I said, opening night loss, despite the fact they had a 3-0 lead, only counts as one game. Second game, 10-2 burn job, that only counts as one win. So we'll see what happens on Tuesday and Wednesday back at Petco Park. Buddy, it's going to be loud. And I just can't wait because Padre fan will bring back the gold towels and they're going to wave them and get excited. I tend to think they might be using the gold towels to wave goodbye to the Dodgers in his playoff series. Agree or disagree?
Well, I'll tell you what. I mean, if the Padres could win games 3 and 4, that'd be unbelievable. But there's a pretty good chance this is going to go back to Dodger Stadium. I mean, this series is just so fantastic. Manny Machado also, he even admitted, hey, Flaherty, man, you got me. You made some good pitches. Again, the maturity of Manny, I'm digging that. But Flaherty was saying something that Manny flipped the ball or threw the ball into the dugout for the Dodgers. Did you hear anything about that?
No, I didn't see that. I didn't hear that. All I know is in baseball terminology, that's what I wrote in my column, Flaherty comes off looking like a red ass. He's ignited. He's ignited this rivalry to another level. Oh, it's going to be fun. John, next topic.
Okay, let's move on here. Go to Greg. Lee, do you think the enthusiasm around the Padres and their fan base can energize an NFL return to San Diego?
Well, Greg's based in the Pacific Northwest, but at the end of the day, here's the storyline. We have no stadium. Who's going to build a new stadium in San Diego? Then you've got that construction cost, and then you get the cost of an expansion team, and the NFL has not indicated we're ready to expand. So thoughts of an NFL franchise in America's finest city, that's way down road. There's so many things that would have to happen. At this point, I don't see that happening in the next 5 years, maybe the next decade. We don't have a stadium to play in, period, exclamation point.
Yeah, but imagine just for a moment that we could channel all this energy to supporting San Diego State football. Because if they start winning, I think they can fill up Snapdragon Stadium, and I think it could be pretty special because San Diego's got a lot of money, a lot of sports fans, and a real hunger for a championship in town.
Well, I'm so disappointed that the Aztecs were not able to launch following by bringing ex-Charger fans into the fold. And I'm so stunned that deposed Charger fans, because I hardly think anybody from here is going to see guys at SoFi Stadium at the prices they're charging, that the defrocked Charger fans didn't embrace the Aztec football program, which had, a decade plus of really good football, different football under Rocky Long and Brady Hoke. So we'll just see how quickly Sean Lewis can make this thing into a first-place program in the Mountain West Conference. And, we're still dealing with the fallout from the death of the Pac-12, now what the Pac-2 is going to become with the expansion, but somebody's got to go a distance to tell me that what we're looking at in the future in 2026 is just not Mountain West Conference 2.0. Not that I'm not interested in it, but to me, there's nothing that grabs me by my sweatshirt and says this is going to be great, because this is Mountain West Conference football more than it is anything else. I do think Gonzaga coming on board as a basketball member is really good. John, next question.
Moving on. Let's go here to Eng. And he says, Profar taunting the Dodgers like that is classless and trash. He needs to be plunked the next game.
Well, Profar does get under your skin. This is not the first time that Profar has done stuff that's infuriated the other dugout. And, he's gotten hit by 8 or 9 pitches. Some of them were just pitches inside. I don't know how many of those beanings were intentional. But at the end of the day, that's just part of his persona. Does he come off and look like a punk? Yeah, he kind of does. Did he kind of infuriate Dodger fan in left field after he went over the seats and pulled that ball back? Yeah, he did. Is there a little bit of showboating style to him? Sure is. Of course, dude is having an unbelievable season in the 280s with some power and playing a pretty aggressive left field. So is he wrong? Nah, he was just standing up, and it was a hell of a play. But that's who he is. I don't see Mookie Betts doing that. Obviously, I don't see Ohtani doing that. Will Smith has got a little bit of hair that he'll create some things behind home plate for the Dodgers. And obviously the Dodgers historically with some of their pitchers have jammed guys and thrown at guys and thrown behind guys. So it's got a different taste to the rivalry right now. But the Padres stood their ground, and now the Padres are going home. And there's going to be an awful lot of loud things said by Padre fan pulling out the gold towel to wave the Dodgers goodbye in this playoff series.
I love the way Profar handled that. I mean, obviously made a great catch, and it was a big moment for him, but he didn't say anything, and he wasn't taunting the fans, but he was looking at them and kind of bouncing. It reminded me of when Julio Rodriguez or the Mariners robbed a home run from the Padres, and he held it for like 10, 15 seconds. And we were all wondering if it was a catch or not. But Profar handled it great. But if you're thinking who's the villain, who's a punk in these playoffs, you know who I'm upset about is Jesse Winker. That guy is something. I mean, he's an easy guy to hate.
Well, if he's on your team doing it, he's an easy guy to love, a.k.a. Profar. If Profar is doing it against your team, no, he's a punk. He's a troublemaker. He's an insider. So it was only for one game. These guys got to get back to playing baseball on Tuesday, and they will. John,
that's how I feel about Tommy Pham. When he's on my team, I like him, and when he's on the other team, I don't.
On we go.
Go to Steve here, and Steve says, Pods in 4. King will pitch a gem tomorrow.
He's on the beam. I mean, this is such a different-looking pitcher right now. This is such a different confidence level. This is just another check mark on my theory that the intangible MVP in this Padres season has to be the pitching coach, Ruben Niebla, and what he's done for a wide variety of guys. Michael King just looks dominant right now, and he's so crafty, and they have refined his mechanics. And this is not the Michael King we saw in the month of April where he was walking guys and giving up bombs. This is a guy that's dominant. Michael King equals Greg Maddux right now in terms of painting the black and on the corners. Very, very impressive.
Well, think about that. I mean, with Michael King and Yu Darvish, these guys are pitchers. They're not flamethrowers, although they can throw it hard. It's just a different breed, and I think this works really well in this postseason. The Padres are just set up. If they don't choke, I think they have a chance to go all the way. This feels like the year.
Well, let's understand this. Focus on the Dodger series. Because I guarantee if they win this series, pal, they got to go to Philadelphia. And Philadelphia is a whole different situation in terms of dominant frontline pitching, established closer, and guys conducting home run derby every game that they play at Citizens Bank Ballpark. So, John, you sound like you're ordering World Series tickets right now. Let's not think about that. Let's just take care of business on Tuesday, Wednesday. Then we'll be talking about the city of brotherly love, a.k.a. brotherly hate, a.k.a. home run derby.
Well, I mean, just as a Padre fan that's been disappointed for so long, I can get a little ahead of myself, and I shouldn't. But, yeah, focus on Game 3, and we'll see how this goes. There's another comment about the next game. This is from Javi. He says, I think the Dodgers will get to King tomorrow. Only question is if Walker Buehler can keep the Padres down.
Well, I think the burning question is, now that you went with Flaherty and you went with the second pitcher, Yamamoto, and they had to pull him after 3, who are you going to give the ball to that you can trust? That's the big issue. Now, I grant you, Buehler can have a good outing. But Buehler's got an ERA of almost 6, so he's had very few good dominant outings as compared to shaky outings, and Buehler's putting a lot of guys on bases. This team does not strike out in San Diego, which means they keep innings extended, which means they make you throw a lot of pitches, which means they wear you out, and by the way, they put the ball in play and occasionally they hit home runs. So this is a very different Padre lineup right now. We'll just have to see what kind of pitcher Buehler shows up to be as we go towards Game 3. I don't think it's going to be easy. At the end of the day, this thing could be over by Wednesday night at 10 p.m. I firmly believe that just because of who the Padres are and what the Dodgers have dissolved into. Agree or disagree?
Well, I'm hopeful that that's correct. And I generally agree. I think there's a chance the Padres could, take the next 2 games. But let's look back here on Game 2 for a minute, because there was so much criticism of Dave Roberts throughout the last decade and how he handles the playoffs. Did you notice anything that Dave Roberts could have done better in Game 2?
The only concern I've had in the first 2 games I've seen, when you got pitchers that are scuffling, please tell me why Mark Pryor, the pitching coach who is their confidant, is sitting next to Dave Roberts for such long periods of time. When Yamamoto could not locate, and they have kind of intimated, they think, and they went back and looked at video, they think that Yamamoto was tipping off pitches from the stretch position. And he struggled. Why is Pryor sitting on the bench next to Dave Roberts and not going to the mound in the first inning or going to the mound in the second inning when Yamamoto is struggling? You need to sight and settle him down. You need to look and see if there's something wrong mechanically. You need to just go out there and talk to him for a minute and say, okay, what's not working for you? Let's go away from that pitch. Let's go to something else. And they did it. They could have done the exact same thing with Flaherty. I mean, you are allowed visits to the mound, so why not send Mark Pryor out there to converse with the pitcher and settle, especially the young pitchers down? Padres, Niebla wears a path out from a dugout to the mound to talk to pitchers who might be scuffling a little bit. Dodgers sit there and watch it happen to them. Don't do anything about it till it's too late. I mean, that's my observation. What's yours?
Well, isn't it interesting how when a pitching coach or even a manager goes to the mound, depending on the team and the circumstances, the pitcher could be upset, that they're either being coached or being pulled. But when Ruben Niebla goes out there, it's like, it's a strategy session and everyone really embraces that. So Niebla, like you say, he's the Padres MVP. I just think, though, that Dave Roberts is damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. If the Dodgers win, they'll say, well, of course, you've got $1 billion you spent in the offseason. Of course, you're going to win. But if he loses, then he's going to get all the blame.
Well, he's damned as they are right now just because of the injuries. He doesn't have a pitching staff. I mean, just think about that scenario, the limitations on Yamamoto, the fact that Flaherty wasn't here to begin with. He's got one starting pitcher left from his rotation that we talked about back on opening day. Let's move on. Next question.
Okay, from the O Canada line, we want to hear from Yin, and she's saying, Hacksaw, thoughts on the Blue Jays keeping, I guess that's Shapiro and Atkins?
Well, they had a lot of injuries to their pitching staff. The first half of the season, they just did not hit. Now, of course, they fired the hitting coach. They fired coaches off that staff. But at the end of the day, they're keeping Schneider as the manager, and they're keeping the decision makers for one more year, and maybe next season becomes a bounce-back season. I thought they were going to have a really good year in the American League East, and they never left Dunedin healthy, and it just got worse and worse. And they had a flash at midseason where Guerrero suddenly got hot, but then Bichette got hurt and had to have the surgery. So they just got to stay the course, and I think they have belief in their players, and maybe the adversity the young pitchers had this season will help them become better, more mature players next year, and then maybe they won't have as many injuries as they've had. But yeah, they were a massive disappointment.
But, the AL East still has the Yankees and the Orioles, and the Red Sox hopefully are going to start coming back. I mean, do you think, what's the toughest division in baseball right now?
Well, I think potentially on paper that could be a really banner division. But you have to understand Boston. I mean, they scuffled to get back to 500. They force-fed a lot of kids. They're a really young roster, and for the most part, they played well. Now, Boston's got to make a decision on which of the young pitchers are really established or if they need to go do something in free agency. Baltimore, think about how frustrating this might be. Here's Baltimore won 100 games last year and got knocked out in their opening playoff round. This year, they had a pile of injuries to their staff, but yet they finished really strong and upbeat. And they got eliminated in the first round again. There's something missing in Baltimore. Now Corbin Burns goes on the free agent market. He was the ace of the pitching staff. So Baltimore, I think they need a veteran type bat, maybe on a short-term rental to complement Gunnar Henderson and all these other guys that they've got. So I think you're going to see Baltimore do something from an acquisition standpoint. Tampa Bay's got a lot of young pitching. Tampa Bay's got some good young players. They supposedly are going to trade some of the extra pitching, and historically they've always done that. They do need some veteran players on the Tampa Bay roster. Toronto needs to bounce back from a health perspective and maybe an attitude adjustment too. So we'll see what the offseason brings. But December 1st and the winter baseball meetings, that's a little bit of ways away from here.
A little bit, yeah. And especially here in SoCal, we're thinking about what's going on with the playoffs. Here's a comment from Joseph. He says, I didn't like anything about that game. Padres players, Dodgers fans.
Yeah, I think it was kind of a game that stained a whole bunch of things. I'm sure there's out-of-town people that say, hey, Profar Tatis, you haven't won bleep in the course of your careers. Why are you jumping up and down and carrying on with the gestures? You haven't won bleep. But they've beaten the hell out of the Dodger pitching staff 2 games in a row. And by the way, they've beaten them 9 times this season. The Dodgers and their $290 million payroll have been beaten 9 times by their little brother to the south. But there's a segment out there that's probably saying, hey, Padres, you haven't won anything. What are you doing? But there's also a segment out there that doesn't like big money Yankee Stadium, big money Chavez Ravine, and saying, way to go, San Diego. So we'll see which Dodger team shows up and if they can compete and hold their emotions in Game 3, or the Padres setting sail to finish these guys off by Wednesday night, move on to the next round in the series.
I liked everything about that game. And I'm not saying that just because I'm rooting for the Padres or that I was raised to not root for the Dodgers. It was just a wildly entertaining game. And it had so many different moments during that game that we remember, and the drama and the electricity and the fans and Profar, I thought, he can be a little bit of a punk, but not so bad. I don't think Profar was a problem. Tatis is young. He's playing with the crowd. In a lot of ways, I don't think what he did was bad either, but it just still was just a lot of fun. And so it was must-see TV. It was stressful in a good way, whereas Game 1 was stressful in a bad way.
We'll see what happens come Tuesday, Wednesday. John, let's touch bases on social media before we wrap up this podcast.
Okay, here we go. Let's go over to social media. Let's talk. Hey, how about little Pete Rose commentary? And this is from Moonlight Fishing. And he says, Johnny Bench said that back in the day, baseball told Rose's teammates to distance themselves from Rose because he would get them in trouble. He ran with the wrong crowd and dabbled in unsavory activity.
Concur with you wholeheartedly. Rose had a lot of friends in baseball, guys that respected him as a player. I think as his life went on, he lost, and there was a lot of erosion of friendships personally, and obviously in what he got himself involved in as a manager with the Padres. And everything I read in the Dowd report just absolutely shocked me. He knows baseball history. He knows Shoeless Joe Jackson, Black Sox scandal, and yet he went out and he did all that. And Rose was just very independent. I thought he was a fabulous player. I think he was very much a flawed person. It leads to the debate, okay, he's dead and gone. So why should there be any further sanctions about somebody who's no longer here? And by the way, in Cooperstown, you've got all this memorabilia there on the first floor of the Hall of Fame. So even if you emotionally think he's in the Hall of Shame, you should allow his name to go on the ballot. But you do that, then you open up the case. Well, if there's going to be a set of rules for Pete Rose, is there a different set of rules for Shoeless Joe? And that then leads to the next segment of guys who did things wrong, a.k.a. your guy, Barry Bonds, and the stain of steroid juice, and Roger Clemens, the rogue pitcher. So we're going to draw the line in terms of citizenship versus just great individual talent. John, go ahead and respond. You're a baseball fanatic.
I think Pete Rose needs to be in the Hall of Fame. He has the record for the most hits. That has to stand. He needs to be acknowledged for what he did on the field, and they need to tell the story, the whole story. Like, just kind of a crazy tangent is I went to the Nixon Presidential Library about 4 or 5 years ago up in Yorba Linda, and they have a whole wing there talking about Watergate, so it's everything. They're telling the whole story, and I think they need to do the same thing with Pete Rose.
Well, as Bud Black said, the guys who affected the impact in the history of the game, statistically, as leaders, as personalities, deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. Just put an asterisk next to the name so when you see it, you'll know what those guys did personally, but should it detract from them professionally? Each case obviously has to be handled different. Next one.
Hey, Lee, tilt your screen a little bit so you look like Kilroy looking over the edge of a fence. Okay, there we go. Now we can see you. Okay, let's go here. Talk about some of the conference realignment. That's always gets a ton of people commenting. And this is from Asa V. Says, if I ran the Pac-12, this is what I would do. The West Division, Oregon State, Washington State, Boise State, Fresno State, San Diego State, and UNLV plus Gonzaga, St. Mary's. And the South Division, Colorado State, Utah State, Memphis, Tulane, SMU, South Florida, plus Grand Canyon and Wichita. So what do you think of that, Lee?
Not much. Thank you. No. Let's look at it from a different perspective. That's a lot of teams. Is there anybody there from the new names that he just posted are there any names there that carry national cachet? And by the way, this is the pie. How many ways you're going to split the pie financially? And you're going to go to the networks and say, Wichita State and South Florida, we want you to pay us a lot of money because they're going to be part of it. That doesn't make any sense to me. Getting Gonzaga does. I wish there was a way they could make a transaction to get BYU out of the Big 12 and add their football and their basketball program, which is pretty good, to the Pac-12. But they're going to have to add one more football program. And I just don't think going out of the Western region to go get these other schools makes a hell of a lot of sense. And by the way, Memphis is one violation under Penny Hardaway from going into NCAA jail. I don't know that you want to dabble with those guys. That's a nice idea, but there's no national brand there that grabs him by the shirt and says, this is going to attract TV network contracts. BYU would with Gonzaga, and it makes geographical sense. The rest of it, nah. There's nothing in the Conference USA or AAC that excites me. John, you got a different opinion out in left field?
Well, out of left field. Well, as they go into new markets, the pie should get bigger, right? Because there'll be more eyeballs, more advertising revenue. But when you look at some of those cities, like, if you're going to expand to Wichita, that's not much. Well, Grand Canyon could be something interesting. So I don't know. Originally, when I saw, names like Tulane and SMU, I was like, and even Memphis, I just wasn't really excited about it. But really, who else is left? I mean, there's nowhere else to go. And hoping that BYU comes back to the West Coast, or UCLA and Stanford and Cal decide to come back. I don't know if that's happening. There's too much money involved.
Well, there's a lot of money involved, but you got some unhappiness in the Bay Area right now. This ACC thing with Cal and Stanford doesn't look good. And BYU might have jumped out of the independent status a year too early to go to the Big 12. And if these guys are not getting the full boat of money that all those other conference members are, then maybe there's an exit strategy they can employ, which will allow Brigham Young UCLA, Cal, Stanford to come back, and now suddenly that West Coast Conference looks a lot different. Next, social media. Who wants to sound off?
Okay, let's go here. Talk about the Dodgers' way is broken. And this is from Greg, and he says, why are so many injured is a great question, but using Kershaw, Buehler, and Glasnow as examples isn't. Clayton should have retired a year ago, meaning he's old and fragile. Buehler might just be one of those guys that never recovers from TJ surgery, and Glasnow has a history of being injured late in the season.
Yeah, that's a good point. However, this is just not the guys on the 12-man pitching staff. You go through the farm system, and they've had serious surgical issues. A whole bunch of hot prospects have broken down along the way. You know, we did the full screen board picture 2 weeks ago on our podcast, in which Dodgers used 38 pitchers this season. Dodgers had 19 different starting pitchers. Dodgers have had 7 major surgeries. This I think it's an epidemic within the whole structure of the Dodger franchise. It's just not Buehler and bad luck, or just not Kershaw. I mean, when you lose Michael Grove and you look at some of the other young pitchers that have already had to have the surgeries, and what's happened to Dustin May twice, and then the third surgery Dustin May's had, there's an awful lot of guys that are not here. So the Dodgers, and they've openly admitted, they have to do a reevaluation top to bottom of where this organization is, how it acquires pitchers, how they train pitchers, what they demand of their pitchers. But there's also a philosophical thing from the players. And Walker Buehler was quoted as saying, I am a Dodger pitcher. Dodger pitching means max effort. Dodger pitching means all these wide variety of pitches. Dodger pitching means there is risk involved. If I win, we win. If I win, we win, and I get a bigger contract, I am a major league pitcher, and I'm willing to take on the risk to do it the Dodger way. That's coming from the ACR staff, who's now had 2 surgeries and has not come back to be the same pitcher, as he keeps sending them out every 5th day. Tough way to operate. And I'll tell you, it's going to be very interesting to see from a healthy evaluation how they're going to change the culture of Dodger pitching, John.
Yeah, I mean, they got to make some big decisions here. I think I heard someone mention that the Dodgers pitching in the minor leagues had the highest overall fastball velocity in baseball. I don't know if that was true or not, but if it is, that's what they're telling them to throw hard. Maybe they could learn a lot from seeing Yu Darvish and Michael King and even Yamamoto, that there's a different way to throw.
Concur. It's going to be a very interesting off-season, off the field for the Dodgers and the evaluation of their culture and their philosophy. Let's take one more. What else you got there, John?
How about some Chargers talk? And this is from Zonka. It says, before the injuries to the offensive line, it was working. Dominated the line of scrimmage for the first 2.5 weeks. I think Alt plays next week against Denver, and Slater won't miss many more games after that. Well,
the only difference of opinion I have is they did that game 1 against the Raider Nation. Look where the Raiders are. Game 2, they pounded the ball against who? Carolina. What's their record? So at the end of the day, when they started playing real people, look what happened in the Kansas City game. Look what happened in the last game in Pittsburgh. At the end of the day, I don't know how to word this. It's early in the process. They need to be able to get their offensive linemen back on the field. Alt looks like he's coming back, which is a lot quicker than a lot of people thought. But this is the second pectoral injury to Slater. That's got to be an issue. I think they have a deficiency at center. And the quarterback's taken way too many shots. I mean, Justin Herbert has now had 5 different injuries over a span of about 3 years. He's taken an awful lot of hits. We'll just see, where they are coming off the bye week as they get ready to dive back into the schedule. And if they continue to run it, my quiet fear, and that's probably why Zonka is making this comment, my private fear is they are so mandating run the football, pound the football, that the thing that made Herbert great, which was his aggressiveness down the field and his ability to throw, it's kind of gone away because Justin Herbert statistically has not had any big games yet, and we're 5 games into the Chargers season. So we'll see coming over this bye week how many guys are healthy and can they fast forward the development. Their passing game looks really pedestrian to me, even though Quentin Johnston has done okay in some games and McConkey looks like a keeper, but he's a route runner. He's not a deep down the field terrorist threat. So We'll see if they can run it and if they can hit bigger plays through the passing game and if they can protect Herbert, because right now they haven't done all that on a consistent basis unless they were playing somebody's bad team. John?
Well, when some of the NFL analysts, praise Herbert, what are the things that they praise him for? I mean, I noticed that when he's in the pocket, he'll move around and step forward in the pocket and hit receivers downfield. But what are some of the other intangibles or skill sets that he brings?
Smart guy. You could take your GPA, my GPA in college, and add it together, and it wouldn't equal the GPA that the kid who got appointed for a Rhodes Scholarship got at the University of Oregon. He's smart as a cookie, strong arm, accurate arm. Now, moves the pocket, explosive at 6'6", he can run. Thing is, he's taken an awful lot of hits along the way, and that's been a deterrent because he's starting to build a track record of getting beat up and banged up, and you really don't want that in your quarterback. But I think he's sharp. And I think there's just so many positives to him, and it's been an issue. He's had good people, a lot of great people around him, and maybe they're building it. But I think, you and I said this the first week of September when we did our preview, I think they're one more good draft away from arriving, but they got to keep that quarterback on the field. But there's an awful lot of positives to Justin Herbert.
Yeah, do you think Jim Harbaugh is satisfied with where they are right now in sort of this progress to a new era?
He's lost a bunch of games early on. He didn't lose as many at Michigan, but it takes time. They're just got to be patient. They have to work their way through it. I don't think he's not going to allow that locker room to become an emotional roller coaster. They're just going to stay the course and keep on going and just hope they can get the quarterback on the field and get the quarterback healthy, and then they can protect the quarterback because that quarterback drives a lot of things that are there. But same token, that offensive front's got to get healthy. Same token, they need Joey Bosa in his $30 million contract to stay on the field, too. So there's a whole pile of things that Harbaugh has to hope work out. Hey, listen, we hope you have enjoyed this wide variety of our Monday bonus podcast. This podcast brought to you by DIXIELINE Lumber and Home Centers. Thanks again to John Riley for making this thing work. I've been at my cottage in the northern Adirondacks near the New York-Canadian border. John is back in the sunshine. We will be back here on Thursday, and then we'll be talking Padres-Dodgers playoff series. Are they going to the next round, or are they headed back to a Game 5? We'll talk about the NFL and college football, too. John, have yourself a great week. Thanks for making this thing work. We'll catch up to you on Thursday.
I'm looking forward to Thursday, but I can see in the background there's a lake back there. I mean, what are your plans for the family while you're up in the Adirondacks?
Well, it's cold and it's chilly, but that's okay because that's why we wear hoodies and turtleneck sweaters, and it's going down to 32 degrees. No snow yet, but all the colors are changing and the leaves are about to fall off the trees. But it's family tradition to come celebrate fall and see the colors in upstate New York. John, have yourself a great week. We'll catch up to you Thursday.
Right on. We'll see you Thursday, Lee.
Thanks for being with us, and thank you for joining us on Hacksaw's Headlines.
Join us again for Hacksaw's Headlines on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And find the audio version on your favorite podcast app.
Touchdown, San Diego!
For more content, go to LeeHacksawHamilton.com.